Hey everyone, this is Ryan, and I'm joined with my co-host Connor. This is another episode of Voices from Corners Unknown, episode 17, and I think we just continue to try and go down this path, or we're trying to go down some interesting musical paths here, because in this episode we kind of delve into a couple other genres I think you and I are both not very well acquainted with. I think that is fair to say. So it should be interesting. Please bear with us, and hopefully we don't frustrate you with our lacking vernacular or some of our descriptions of these genres. But as in typical Voices fashion, we have 3 albums to discuss. We've got some atmospheric dark folk from a project entitled Zeresh and their album Sigh by Sigh. And then we also have I can't even really describe this album, kind of this weird amalgamation of metal, ambient, hard rock, heavy metal, etc., from this Polish quartet titled NewBreed, with their brand new album out on Self-Made God Records entitled Law. And then we have we had the Power Electronics last episode. This one's pretty much outside our comfort zone as well, and this is No Future Volume 2 from Keosz. I can't say.
I'm glad that you dropped that first, because
yes, just let me take the furnace blast. So and that one, No Future Volume 2, he is a dark ambient producer, but this album of his is more of an electronica, bass driven, beat driven cluster of songs. It's an LP, so this one is well outside our comfort zones. I listen to this music here and there, but I really don't have a knack for describing it, so we will fumble through this, and thank you for anybody that gets to the end of this episode. So where do you want to start? Where do you want to start the episode, man? What poison do you want to pick?
let's start with the Zeresh project. Yeah.
Zeresh? Okay. Right. Okay. Yeah, so did you glean any background on this project? You probably, I don't know how deep you did research, but you should notice that there's some similarities with another album we discussed a few episodes ago.
Yeah. Zeresh is another project by Tamar Singer.
Yes.
Who was also on the Necromishka, The Space Between Us, which we did a couple episodes ago.
I'm glad you picked up on that. I was gonna give you crap if you didn't pick up on
Connor,
that.
dude.
But yeah, come on, man. Get your research.
She also has her main project, Cruel Wonders, which I believe she's the singer of.
Need to get more into that.
Oh, it's her, and I believe it's her husband. So yeah, she does so she is the kind of the purveyor, the torchbearer of Zeresh, and then Cruel Wonders is more of it's more doomy folk, which is interesting. I haven't been able to listen to it too much, but I think that we could safely call Cruel Wonders more of Tamar's main project, and Zeresh, I believe, is more of an offshoot. It's kind of a bit of a divergence from that project, as well as Necromishka. But anyway, are there other details that we're leaving out here?
Well, it was released on 999 Cuts Records. I don't, or maybe it's 999 Cuts Records. I don't know how they want it to be said, but and it was released on January 18th, 2018.
Yep. Yeah, and this is her debut EP. So there's only this one album, and what'd you think of this one? I'm curious what you think of this in relation or in contrast to Necromishka. But what were your sentiments on this, or kind of initial impressions and such?
I liked it quite a bit. Like, I'm totally down with the whole depressive feel of it, and just the folk vibes too. Of the once again we have like these kind of folky guitars within this dark ambient sound.
Yes.
And it was cool. I enjoyed those two things mixed together quite a bit.
Yeah, I don't, before Necromishka, I don't know if I ever really listened to music like that before. And this one, in comparison, to me, Zeresh feels a bit like Necromishka had some harsher tones blended in it, and this one has some harshness a little bit, but overall, I found a lot of the ambience to be rather suffocating and depressing and engulfing. Like, they're just very huge. Like, you just kind of feel like you're being swallowed, or you're kind of in this weird foggy state of mind while listening to it, because it's just so overwhelming and omnipresent. But yeah, I really enjoy this release. Do you want to dig into some of the songs? I assume we should probably just start with the first one.
Definitely jump into the first one.
Yeah, so what'd you think of that one?
Yeah, track number 1, "Oh Gather Me the Rose." I mean, instantly I'm already like, okay, this is pretty depressive, and I was like picturing, I don't know, kind of just dark forest, like you're only seeing the silhouettes of the trees, and there's like maybe like a little stream going through, and there's just like kind of foggy. That was like my mental imagery, but yeah, it kind of just has like a depressive sound in the start, and then the kind of just lonely guitar strums in the darkness.
Yeah, and like kind of the deep melancholy that drips off of each note that's strummed on the strings. Definitely.
And then the vocals come in, and it has just this weird like folky, even more depressive vibe that it just is really just well done though. I what I like about the ambience is so on this track, you get the like this deeply melancholic guitar melody kind of permeating through, and then it kind of just starts to get enshrouded in the ambience, and it kind of gets drowned out almost, and it kind of suffocates and suppresses it a little bit. And then when Tamar's vocals come out, she like her voice is coming through, but she's not singing it super loud to the like, so like sometimes you hear some words come through, but sometimes they get muffled in the ambience. They kind of get muddied in the mix, which I like as well, because she kind of has this really low humming sort of articulation of words. Not always, but the way it kind of blends all together in this, like, this hazy, I don't know, just this hazy cloud. And I found it interesting too, and you're usually better with lyrics than I am, or I mean, sometimes I just never give them the time of day they sometimes so rightfully deserve. But what I found interesting about this EP is that it seems like Tamar kind of lifted or adopted some of these older poems or texts from like authors. So like in this track, the lyrics are from William Ernest Henley. Not familiar with their work, but I think that they lived in like the mid 1800s, and I think that this is a poem of theirs. I don't know what research you gleaned from that, but I got a bit of the same thing.
Okay.
Yeah, when they come off just so old timey and
like,
I don't know. It feels like something like a bard and like it's traveling around from tavern to tavern,
right,
telling these tales, these depressive tales.
Yeah, and it's interesting when you listen to it, because the lyrics and the tone, they fit so well together, and I don't know, just like even though they're not technically her own words, like the melody and the depressive atmosphere fits them all so well, and I think the depressive atmosphere comes through, especially in the liner note that Tamar leaves about,
this EP of hers is dedicated to her beloved and deceased to her grandparents.
Yeah, all 4 of them.
So
that was pretty cool.
Yes. Yeah, so I think that definitely comes through when you listen to this. But I really like the first track, and especially with kind of like, just that chilling atmosphere, and you kind of get some moments where the words come through and you can understand what's going on. And fortunately, she provides the lyrics so you can read them. Some artists don't do that, and it kind of gets on my nerves. But she provides all the lyrics, and the way it kind of undulates under this gray, I don't know, like this gray, depressive, dreary atmosphere, and they kind of lull and they creep up, and you can hear some words sometimes, and then they kind of get swallowed and you can't really hear what she's saying, but it kind of just adds to the overall ambience, her voice and the delivery of it. But yeah, what about, did you have any notes, sentiments on the subsequent 3 tracks?
Oh yeah, I like every single one of them has its own thing. I'm like, this is really cool.
Yeah.
But
right.
Yeah, so the second track, Halls Grew Darker.
Mm-hmm.
You still get that kind of grim atmosphere. But this one, like, at first kind of has this dripping cavern-like vibe. And there's like this faint scratching and these like vocals like that you can't really make out yet because they haven't really taken the forefront, kind of lurking behind. And then you got like a deep resonating drone. And I was hearing like weird chirping sounds that kind of develop into like a wall of crickets, but like I was kind of
okay, that's
sound.
interesting.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Yeah.
And the lyrics in that one are cool too. It's like about, I don't know, like a queen getting sick. And like how everything about like their kingdom's getting darker. And it's just kind of sad stuff, but
yes. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, and what I liked about this track specifically, and this may be pulling from some of the influence in her other project, Cruel Wonders, but I feel, and again, when it comes to more ambient productions, I can never pinpoint what actually is producing these sounds that you're hearing.
No idea.
I'm always kind of just floundering like an idiot. I'm like, oh, what the hell is actually being said here? But I feel like she was using her voice, and she was kind of making like these really deep growls of some sort,
gnarly.
and they were. Yeah, and I really like that, and that's where I was thinking, maybe she kind of adopted some influence, or she kind of took some influence from like a doomier side, because it definitely gave me that vibe, like just the and as you described, like the cavernous bellow and the way she is just growling in it. I don't know, it's such an interesting way to layer the song and kind of add some depressing and some foreboding atmosphere to folk music. I just never would have thought to hear those kinds of sounds intermixing on a track before, and I think that comes through quite well.
It's so good.
Yeah, and there's a really and what I like about this track too is there's a pretty nice, beautiful, uplifting little passage about halfway through, or and there's kind of like this little moment. It's always hard for me to pinpoint exactly where these moments occur. I take notes, but I don't like to be extremely precise with their location. But this is also the longest track. It's just over 9 minutes. But about halfway through it, there's this really uplifting little guitar melody that punches through. And I don't know if there's really many other moments on this EP where I kind of felt kind of that beautifulness coming through and the tones. Most of it, I found it to be pretty depressive, and that's not a bad thing. I love that kind of stuff. I kind of feed off that energy, but I don't know what your sentiments are on that passage. But
I mean, I like to feed off the energy too, so just sit there in darkness.
Right. Yeah, and what's cool about this track too is that it fades out, so you have these you kind of get those growls in the beginning. You get that beautiful guitar melody, that folky bit, and then near the end, the last couple minutes, it starts to coil down into this drone, and it feeds pretty nicely into the next track, Holy. And that track, I believe, is just an instrumental track.
Yeah.
And that one is just pretty much like this perpetual engrossing wash of just dreary atmosphere. Essentially, you get some cracks of electric guitar, and they kind of have this solemnness, and it kind of comes through really powerfully after the drone and the previous track, and then you kind of get this swallowing, harrowing phantom of ambient soundscapes. But I don't want to discuss all the details of it because I always talk too much. What do you think of this one?
It might actually be like my favorite track on the album. Just
really? Okay.
Just that guitar at the beginning, and then like this one kind of had like this weird vocal roar thing too. Like there's no lyrics involved in this one, but there's some weird vocal stuff that's kind of distorted that I was noticing.
Okay, yeah. I think that I did catch on some of that, but yeah, it's one of those things where you can't really ascertain what's being exchanged or what's being said. But yes, I think I know what you're talking about. I think I can recall that bit.
But yeah, just like the drone-driven guitar and everything about it was just so cool. There's kind of this whispering wind drifting through, and
right.
Yeah, it was a cool
I
one.
found
some nice landscapes.
Yeah, and I found this to be a nice way to kind of showcase just the versatility on the EP. It's not just straight kind of like depressive folk melodies coming through all the time. I think this is a really well crafted, dark, brooding piece of ambient that is supplemented nicely with a bunch of guitar, and it definitely creates a very overwhelming inundation, kind of this overwhelming atmosphere. And I guess since we've already talked about 3 tracks, should we just talk about the 4th one, or do you think we should leave that to folks to explore for themselves?
I mean, I want to talk about it, but that is true.
Go for it.
And I just love the title of that track to begin with, the double ballad of life and death.
Yeah,
and,
definitely.
Yeah, it opens with these nice just guitar riffs over like some deeper sounding atmospheric stuff, and then just like lonely guitar strums in the void again, and then the guitar starts to build, and I don't know, that whole portion of the track just sounds super organic, and it just has these weird scratches to it, and then the atmosphere starts to build.
Yes.
And then the vocals are doing a really cool thing where like there's like a slight echo going on, and there's like a rhythm in the delivery. It had this, that one really had this like nice folky vibe with the lyrics and vocals and all that.
Yeah.
In fact,
and I think go ahead.
The lyrics are actually really cool in this one. The like one portion of it's fools may pine and thoughts may swill, cynics gib and prophets rail. Moralists may scourge and drill, and it just keeps going and going, and it's just wow.
Yeah.
It's cool.
Yeah, and I think you hit on a point, and I think you described that much better than I could with my incessant rambling, but I definitely liked this track specifically as you described with the guitar, the way the guitar plays in this one. There is a little bit of time where the ambience is shed and you can really hear the guitar coming through quite cleanly, and I think that adds a little bit to it. You kind of hear the bending of the guitar strings a little bit too, and it gives it some nice textures, and it kind of, I don't know, it's just a nice way to open it up so it doesn't feel so ominous throughout. And I think that's all I would really add to what you said, because I think you described it perfectly as is.
Yeah, that was cool.
Yeah. All right. Well, yeah, so where do you want to start with the second album? Which one do you want to roll with?
Let's go with NewBreed's Law.
Okay, that sounds good. So, yeah, this was an interesting find. I don't know how the hell I came across this. I seriously think I was just trolling, not like actually trolling, but just kind of going around Bandcamp and somebody threw out a suggestion of this album's release. And to be frank, when I saw the album artwork, I'm like, well, that doesn't really give me any indication of what this sounds like, so I wasn't really sure what to expect. I was like, okay, well, it's just, some city skyline with just some text on it, just saying NewBreed Law, and I was like, okay, I don't really know what this is. And some of the album description was interesting, though. And I was like, okay, well, let's see what this sounds like. And man, I don't know what the fuck this is, but I really like it. It has a wide array of sounds, and this band has been around for a damn long time, so since '99. And shit, I think when they formed, I was like 7 years old. So I mean, I was like a little, like, I don't know. It's just crazy that they've been persisting this long. And it's interesting because I've looked at some, like, even their social media, and they don't seem to have a huge following, which is just a little surprising to me because I find this eclectic. I find the sound to be pretty eclectic, but not in a way where it comes off as, it doesn't give off like that vibe where these guys are just, mishmashing all this stuff together and it sounds like an album. I don't know. Like, I've listened to plenty of albums where they kind of crossbreed genres and it just doesn't work. It falls flat. But I think these guys do it well, and maybe the amount of time they've been around for, that has led to the sharpening of their skills. But this is a Polish quartet, and I believe they've persisted. Two of the original founding members are still in the band, so it's Thomas and Stanislaw, and that's the vocalist, guitarist, and drummer respectively. But what did you? I want to know what you thought of this, because I don't know. Just wanted to throw a curveball at you, as I usually am inclined to do.
Dude.
So what was your impression?
This album was super cool. Like, first off, the way, like, somebody's described it, some person in the comments, like, it's like Godflesh meets Alice in Chains meets Deftones meets Ministry. And definitely the more, like, 90s grunge whatever sounding vocals are what caught my eye initially. There's definitely some Soundgarden and Alice in Chains sounding stuff in there. Like,
and I think you're more well versed in that stuff than myself, and that's why I wanted to kind of rope you into this, because I figured you have more experience with this, so you can, you can add that extra, that extra dimension to the discussion.
Oh yeah, especially like because once like Chris Cornell died, what was it, last year? I always kind of listened to a lot of his projects, but and then after that, I really got into him.
See, I didn't even know that you were into that kind of stuff. Frankly, I thought you were just I don't know. I guess we're still exploring our musical preferences, but I've never gotten a clear indication on where you stand with those genres of music. It's just interesting to hear.
Oh yeah, I dig it, dude. But they mix that like sound with like the lyrics and all that, even some of the instrumentals. But with this heavier, more like progressive and I don't know, like thrashy in some portions, and even like some weird industrial death metal sounding shit. Like there's just so much to it, and it all just fits so well together. I haven't really heard anything like it.
Yeah, right. Like when you read it on paper, it seems like it should just be a goddamn train wreck, but it's not. And I guess this would be a good point to just start diving into the music. This is 8 tracks in length. We definitely probably shouldn't go into all the tracks. I think that would grow pretty tiresome for folks. But I do think the first track, titled Expectations Chaos, would give you a pretty good idea of what the rest of the album will sound like in a sense. Like it'll kind of give you, it'll kind of set up your expectations, no pun intended, of like what you're really going to be hearing, or kind of the dynamism, the weird switches and genres and such. But do you wanna lead the charge on the description of this one?
Yeah, track number 1, Expectation Chaos.
Yeah.
Yeah, it kind of just starts off with this, I don't know, this nice atmospheric sounding, shimmering, and then out of fucking nowhere, these heavy hitting, just chuggy ass guitar just blasts through.
Yes.
And it's just like, holy shit. And then this nice, I don't know, there's some nice bass lines throughout this entire album, but then some bass hits, and like, it had really, that's where I'm like, dude, it sounds like some Soundgarden bass.
Yeah, I see. It gave me, and that's where it's an interesting juxtaposition. You say Soundgarden. For me, it kind of reminded me almost of Godflesh. I don't know if you've listened to much of them. Yeah, they're like pretty. I mean, to my recollection, I haven't listened to them in a good bit, but from what I recall, they have some pretty like driving bass guitar stuff. Like they have some really slick grooves, and this kind of reminds me of it a little bit. And yeah, that passage when the bass just is coming through. The production is so well done too. Everything is balanced so nicely in this. And I will say, when you were describing that ambient passage, I love that. And when the instruments came in on multiple occasions, I've listened to this album. It has literally startled me multiple times.
Come in. There's no warning.
I listened to it in my car a couple of times, and I had the volume up a little too high because I was listening to an ambient album before, and as soon as it came in, I almost like just hit my brakes because it scared the crap out of me so much. I was like, what the hell is this? But I gotta give it props for keeping me on my toes. But anyway, as you were saying.
Yeah, dude, that was fucking sick. No, but that like bass line, listen to Spoon Man by Soundgarden. I feel I'm gonna keep coming back to Soundgarden and Audio Slave and Austin Strange quite a bit. They're throughout my notes a lot. I don't know. I'm not saying these guys copy them at all, but there's definitely a lot of influence in there. But
and I think
that track is so good as like a little starter to indicate how their whole sound is.
Yeah, and what's interesting is they kind of go from that really driving, groovy bass line, and it has, the production is super punchy and heavy, and then there's this passage where they kind of have this almost dissonant, twinkly guitar moment, and it gives me almost like a Meshuggah kind of vibe, or kind of a Genti. As some folks may know what I'm talking about, some folks may not, but it kind of has like this robotic chunkiness to it, and it almost, I don't think you've ever really listened to them much, but there's also this other band named Car Bomb, and they kind of have these extremely dissonant, off-kilter, off-tempo grooves, and it just sounds like really robotic and futuristic, and it's disorienting, and that kind of vibe is encapsulated in that very short period, that short duration in this song. And it just fits so well within the context of the track. Like, it just doesn't feel out of place at all. And then near the end of it, a little guitar solo pokes its head in, and then it kind of starts screeching and soaring atop, and it almost takes on a post-metal atmosphere of sorts. It kind of has that, like, just that grandiosity to it. Like, you're kind of looking over the sky, like you're kind of looking at the album artwork. Like, it kind of gives you this gaze of this skyline. It's really interesting.
I can see that.
What other tracks struck you?
Well, I could easily do like all of them, but how about let's jump into track number 3, Simon Said.
Yeah, that's a good one.
Oh, that's another thing in the first track we forgot to kind of mention. There's like this weird like audio like snippet thing going on.
Oh yeah, yeah. I didn't figure out what that was from, but I assume it was some sort of a sample.
It sounded like it came
with
from
the
like a
kind of-
movie or something. Like, what is this? Like Pinocchio?
Yeah.
Like, what am I hearing? It was some weird sounding stuff.
Maybe, man. You're in the film industry. You probably
maybe,
know
dude,
you pick up on that stuff way better than I.
It was interesting, but yeah, and track number 3 kind of starts off with something like that too, where there's just like it kind of sounds like it's from the news. I don't even know. Where it's like there's nobody in there that he didn't in some way support, and then the instruments kind of blast in, and
Right.
and then there's like these dragged out vocals that sound really cool, and then there's like a more jazzy prog sound kind of jumps in.
Yeah, that bit reminded me of Mastodon, actually. I don't know if you got that vibe, like just like that, when maybe I need to brush up on my Mastodon stuff, but like that proggy bit where the guy's kind of doing that high-pitched singing passage. He kind of has this moment where instead of doing whatever vocals you would typically expect, he kind of has this high-pitch bit where he's vocalizing, and as you were saying, there's kind of this airy, majestic atmosphere kind of swirling beneath them, and then it kind of goes into this proggy, free-form, almost noodly guitar passage, and it kind of gave me a jazz vibe, or just like this really proggy vibe, really out of nowhere, but it fits
it was really
so
cool.
well.
Like actually, in one of those little, he changes his vocals so often in this track.
Yes.
But and I don't know if we were
Yes,
thinking
very
of the same
versatile.
part, but I kind of got the like Dillinger Escape Plan vocals in there.
Yeah, that's
At
a
one
good.
point.
That sounds about right too. See, and that's what's kind of neat about this band too, is it's like you can hear different influences, and we may not be exactly seeing eye to eye on it, but it still makes you kind of recall all these other bands, and they kind of transform it into their own sound. I think that is a real neat component of this album on the whole. I think it's really interesting to listen to. But anyway,
It's like they're just taking some of my favorite like portions of different bands and just fucking transforming it into their own awesome shit.
right.
But yeah, then that track, like, there's so many different like tempo changes, and the guitars at one point start playing off each other, and like there's more of that just weird audio recordings that I have no idea what they are.
Yes.
And,
Right.
it's just chunky guitars and.
Yeah, and I like the seamlessness of this one as well. The way it kind of it opens, as you described a little bit. It has kind of a chunky metal, chuggy riff. It's kind of chunky, heavy, and it has this. It kind of rolls from these metal passages into these kind of airy, atmospheric, suspended chords almost, and the way it just kind of undulates between this heaviness and then it seamlessly flows into these airy passages. It just has this very ethereal vibe to it, and I think that may make it's probably one of my closer to favorite tracks on this album. And I also wanted to talk a bit about the second track, but I know we don't want to go track by track. But just in that song alone, that one, Star Time, that one gave me stuff like Porcupine Tree vibes, and it gave me some vibes of like Fair to Midland. I don't know if you ever listened to those bands.
I listened to a little bit of Fair to Midland.
Yeah, it kind of gave me some of those vibes, and then there was also even a bit of I got kind of a Fallujah vibe in part of it. There was like a death metal airiness to it, and I was kind of like, oh, there may be other bands that are like that, but the way it hit me, I was like, man, that really reminds me of some of the atmospherics that band employs. But I just like to point out the references, because every time I think of something where there's an actual reference, I'm like, oh man, I can't believe I know I don't know. It's just kind of
actually weird. Intelligent enough to make connections and like this music.
Yeah, right. It just dude. Sometimes I don't know. I always struggle to make those, there are certain bands that I listen to and I just fail to recall exactly what they sound like, or it just gnaws at me. You're like, oh my god, I know what that sounds like, and you just try to grasp it. And there are so many moments throughout this record where I'm like, man, this reminds me of something that I know I've listened to a bunch back in the day, and I can't always remember it, and it frustrates me, but it makes me appreciate it just that much more because I can like vicariously live through some of those. You know, like I just kind of recall those older memories of listening to bands that I can't name anymore. But I'm like, oh yeah, I remember these. I remember being into this genre, that genre, et cetera, and it just all congeals in this one weird amorphous mass. But I'm rambling again. So what other tracks do you want to jump into?
Damn it, Ryan. No.
I know. God.
So maybe track number 4, Snake Eater. We're just doing all of them.
Yeah.
But yeah, that's one, like, I would say the first 3
like
tracks kind of work well with each other. They all kind of have the same vibe in a way, but then you get to Snake Eater and it kind of changes. And
yes.
There's some cool drum work at the beginning of it. And then there's this, I don't know, this nice bass over this really weird atmospheric sound. I was like picturing kind of like a desert landscape, like Monument Valley or something like that.
That's the guitar tone or whatever pedal or whatever they were using, it definitely had like a dusty vibe to it, kind of like a windswept, sand swept, dirt swept kind of a feel to it. And then I think it goes into kind of one of those heavy metal pockets that you would describe as, Alice in Chains or Soundgarden or what have you. Like it kind of has that. It kind of goes into that moment, but you could probably describe that better than myself.
Yeah, well, like I was kind of seeing it like, so it goes from this one like kind of vocal, and that's kind of at the beginning of the track, but then when it goes into that more like like the heavier sound,
the
hard rock
kind of stuff.
It kind of took on the weird nasally distorted vocals that sound so much like Alice in Chains. It's crazy.
Yeah, definitely. I finally did some research because I know people will grill me for not listening to Alice in Chains enough, and I went back and listened to some of their albums, and then I listened to this again. I'm like, oh yep, I can see like the comparison. It's it's bright as day. It's very easy to make that connection. So I'm glad I did that before doing this, so you didn't just rip me.
Like, yo, dude, what's wrong with you? But
yeah,
and then it kind of takes you onto this, I don't know, hard rock proggy journey.
Yeah.
And then it gets just out of nowhere, it gets interrupted by just hammering guitars again and like these kind of strange atmospheric wails. I don't know.
Yeah.
And like the I don't know, the instrumentals kind of get more like chaotic in a way, and there's a lot of like just whittling and wailing and just ups and downs. Right. And it's just like one big instrumental journey.
Yeah, no, I really enjoy that track, and when I was listening to that, at least in the beginning, it definitely had this kind of this peaceful atmosphere, and I don't know, the way the tone came about it, like the deserty bit, but then I also felt like part of it was almost like a weird mirage I was seeing in like the concrete jungle of some some like fallen metropolis or something. It kind of gave me some weird vibe.
Yeah, like maybe like
I don't know,
like
kinda,
Dubai or something, like just abandoned in the future.
Yeah, it just gave me that vibe. I don't know why, just when I listened to it. But I guess that's kind of the cool part about listening to music is the way it the images it conjures. Like it's sometimes you just think of certain things. You're like, I don't know why I think that, but it just conjures that image. I don't know, but that's kind of the vibe it gave me. And just so we don't go into all the tracks, I think, and we can fight tooth and nail over which one you want to talk about, but I wanted to just talk about like kind of like the bookend track, the Skyscrapers story. I liked that one quite a bit. I really like that, how it kind of bookends the album kind of as it started, and this kind of is a callback to, as you so rightfully described, Paperclip on that Power Electronics album by Bell. How you were like, oh, Paperclip, because it's like you're finishing the album, and I made that synapse. I was like, oh man, I learned something from Connor today. Like, oh, I really remembered something.
Nice.
And there, like that ambient passage at the beginning of Skyscraper story seems to kind of harken back to the beginning, and it kind of takes on a vibe that's not nearly as heavy as the first track. It definitely has a more kind of a reflective timbre to it, kind of very relaxing, airy, and it has some electronic passages worked in there as well. Like it kind of has some murmuring synth of some sort. Maybe it's synth, maybe it's something else. I don't have the technical
know nothing about that stuff.
Right. But what did you think about that?
I had it marked down as one of my favorites also, and like you
great.
said, how they're kind of harkening back to the strange atmospheric stuff you heard in the first track, which was really cool. And then like I really dug like some of the drum beats in that one. And then you get some more of that like tasty like industrial Meshuggah stuff going on.
Yes.
And then dude, there's just a lot of cool instrumental work throughout the entire thing. I just really wish I had lyrics to read though, because there's some portions where I'm like, dude.
All right, well, it's funny you bring up the lyrics. I actually have a physical copy. So what lyrics are you interested? Do you want to know the Skyscraper?
I mean,
story?
the whole album, but
like,
some of the stuff in Skyscraper would be cool.
It looks like it's actually a pretty short phrase or a couple sentences.
Exactly.
But oh fuck, I can't read the goddamn handwriting. Oh shit.
What is it like? Actually handwritten?
Where you have the wind to carry on to sail through the dark moment. That's it. Yeah, sorry. Some of these words are written in a cursive.
Oh, I see.
And I'm not good at reading cursive.
Yeah, dude.
So that's what that is. So where you have the wind to carry on to sail through the dark moment. So that is as simple as it gets.
Yeah,
but
I was kind of picturing like a Skyscraper story, like, okay, humans built it, and now it's kind of like going through some of the other themes we kind of picked up on, if we're right or not. But I was just kind of picturing like an abandoned skyscraper, years after it's been taken care of, and the wind's kind of just eating away at it, and it's like this high up there, like on the 100th floor or something, and it's just looking down on the land below it, and I don't know. There's some cool imagery.
Yeah, no, and this is a really neat album, and I'm glad that I accidentally stumbled upon this, and I'm glad that you were willing to discuss this. I think that this is a pretty marvelous record, and there are a couple tracks there's some other tracks, say like Spiritual Pornography and such, track 5, that there's some tracks in there that they didn't really jive with me as well as some of the other tracks on this record. Like they just didn't hit as hard. But overall, I think just the strange concatenation of all the sounds. It's like I said earlier, it sounds like it should just be a goddamn nightmare, but it coheres so well together. And I don't know. I think even people who aren't into metal, they could listen to this and they'd be able to hear a bevy of influences, and they'd be able to call out band names that I've probably not even heard of or I'm totally unfamiliar with. So
yeah, I agree.
All right, and that leaves us with Keosz's No Future Volume 2. So do you have some background on this guy? I could talk a little bit about him, but I ramble too much and I don't want to annoy people.
Yeah, I could bring up a little bit. His real name is listed as Eric Oswald, and he's from Slovakia. And this album No Future Volume 2 was released August 20th, 2018, so only a few weeks ago. And it's like this strange kind of darker electronic stuff. I have no background on this type of music, so
neither do I.
It's pretty cool stuff though. I think he did everything himself. It's all self-made.
Yeah, I mean there are some features on this. There are some vocalists that come through. Yeah, so he does some collaborations, but this album, Volume 2, it's an obvious follow-up to Volume 1. And Volume 1, I could say, at least based on my research, it looks like that album is a bit more of an EP, and that came out a decent bit ago, October of 2016.
Right.
So it's been a while since the follow-up. This one is definitely longer. This is more of an LP. It definitely has 12 tracks. It's relatively long. And yeah, he also, so Keosz, and apologies for not saying that correctly. I know I'm probably not saying that correctly. But I absolutely love this guy's dark ambient work as well. He has a couple releases on Cryo Chamber. He also does a lot of artwork and photography as well.
That's
he does
cool.
a lot of stuff. Yeah, very, very versatile, versatile dude. And so he has 2 albums, Be Left to Oneself and Ava, on Cryo Chamber. So that's just to kind of give you some indication of his musical palette and his capabilities. So his album Be Left to Oneself is, I think I could say with about 98% certainty, it's my favorite dark ambient album that I've ever listened to. I listen to it like every single night before I go to sleep. I listen to it all the time. I don't know why I love it so much. I'm hoping to do a review or a more in-depth analysis of it at some point, so I can try to expound upon it. But just to give you some indication of, just to give you some indication that I've been following this guy for a decent bit, and I only recently started dabbling in his more electronic-based productions. I mean, I guess dark ambient is electronic-based production, but more bassier-driven compositions. So, yeah. So if that gives you an indication, and I don't know why. I think we just wanted to try and keep ourselves on edge with some of the music we talk about. Just kind of continue to experiment, and we were going down a route where we were talking about a good bit of sludge music, and I was like, all right, well, I love that stuff, but let's kind of pare that down and go into a new direction. And I mean, obviously we're not talking about any of that kind of stuff on this episode, but yeah, what'd you think on this of this album, on the whole, kind of first impressions, and then kind of like general, just like, how did it impact you? How did it feel? And like, what did you pick up from it when listening to this, given that you're not too familiar with this genre?
Well, first off, I've never really been one to seek out, bass-driven electronic music.
Right. You and me both.
It's never really been my scene, but definitely after listening to this, though, I don't know, maybe I'll give it more of a passage to my ears, but
right.
Yeah, it's some cool stuff. Like, I especially like how they have like the more darker vibe to it.
Yeah,
really captures
there's
that.
A lot. Yes.
And there's like that, I don't know, this weird kind of industrial mechanical sounds mixed in with the beats, and it's just it just has more sinister vibe. But do you since there's volumes to this, No Future and all that, do you have any idea if there's actual like a concept to these? Like, story-wise?
I can't say with 100% certainty, but given my knowledge of Cryo Chamber, so I know Cryo Chamber, they obviously, like, all the albums that exist on Cryo Chamber are like essentially building like a universe. Like, each album in some way, I believe, is connected, or they kind of all exist in some form or another in the same, kind of in the same plane, for lack of a better term. And it wouldn't surprise me if this is completely irrespective of Cryo Chamber, but it would not surprise me if this has some sort of an undercurrent of a story. And I think some of the track titles give you some indication of that.
Yeah, like, and First Landing, Land.
Yeah, and then the way the album progresses tonally, and the way it kind of shifts, because as you described very well, it has I mean, I would say the first, so it's 12 tracks in length, I've already said, but I would say like the first 9 songs are pretty dark and broody, and then the last few tracks kind of lighten up a little more, and I can share some weird extraneous thoughts I was having. I don't know why I was thinking about it, but I had some weird thoughts when listening to this album again. But I would say that there probably is some sort of concept underlying this.
This could easily be like a soundtrack to like a sci-fi movie or like a video game or something. Like it definitely has that vibe to it.
Right, and Eric has he does a good bit, to my knowledge, like Photoshop and a lot of like digital art, and he has produced a number of pieces that I've seen on Instagram and Facebook and other places where he kind of makes, you know, futuristic looking cyber soldiers in Photoshop and such. So I'm goddamn sure that there's some connection between that and this, you know, kind of the aesthetic of what he builds on the computer, you know, like sonically versus, you know, the images he creates. I'm sure that there's a connection between those two.
Right.
But yeah, and as you described, the bass, and I think what really hits me on this album, just on the whole, before we go into specific tracks, is just the sinister undercurrents and the beats, that just the overall production, it's so heavy. It's so dense. Like the bass kicks are so deep. Like I just like feel it hitting me every time that bass kick drops. And I think what's really neat about this album as well is there's so much there's so much rich and dark and brooding ambient soundscapes kind of murmuring beneath all these beats as well. And I think that it gives it a sincere amount of replay value. You know, you're like listening to the beats, but if you kind of shift your ears more toward the ambience, like there's actually some really dark and neat stuff going on underneath the beats as well. And you know, the beats kind of pull your ear one way, but if you focus on other things, there's a lot to be gleaned from each track, which I don't know, I find that really exciting and fun to listen to. So that's why I like this one overall so much. But we should probably talk about a few tracks at the very least.
Yeah.
Where do you want to start? I mean, we could start with the intro, but since it's just kind of intro, I don't know if we really want to start there. But let's where do you want to start?
I think we could just start with actual like First Landing, the second track.
Yeah. That
one, you really, you know, you get the nice beats and the kind of just like clacks, and you know, you got a nice rhythm going on. It's actually, this album's really good to listen to while driving, in my opinion.
Yeah, and it has this really neat little like shuffling texture to it. Like it kind of has like this little shuffling sort of beat going on underneath the bass kick. But anyway.
Yeah. And, like, this is when I really was started, like, already. I'm like, dude, this reminds me of, I don't know, I could see this in a fucking sci-fi video game I've played or something.
Oh, totally. Or some cyberpunk or something of that sort.
Yeah,
easily.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And, just the atmospheric, like, the darkness of that, and then the beats, like, this pairs so well together. And then at parts of this song, like, the beat kind of drops for a little bit, and then you just get the ambience.
Yes.
And that was pretty sick.
Yeah, and it leads me to wonder, or leads me to kind of muse about having this album and then having another version of this album where the beats are stripped out and just the ambience is going on, because I find it that compelling. You know, like I would love to have just a beatless version as well, just so I can hear how much they differ. But anyway.
Right. Sorry, I was yawning. Yeah, and then there's like a nice build up towards the last minute that just builds and builds, and then it just kind of dissipates, and it's just oh, that's cool.
Yeah, and a handful of these songs are pretty succinct. You know, they're all within 4 or 5 minutes of one another, and I really enjoy First Landing. Trying trying to choose some other tracks to go into. I guess we could, like the song Land has this really neat little clap, this kind of clap clop sound. It has like this, almost like this water dribbling texture to it that formulates the beat. I don't know if one of those things that's a little hard for me to describe since my vocabulary isn't too robust here.
Yeah, same.
But the way that it kind of creates this rhythm, and then you get this yawning ambience, like it just kind of has this void like swallowing to it, like it just kind of encompasses you in this bleak embrace. And I don't know, I find so much solace in the bleakest of sounds.
Yeah, same.
It's strange, but I also liked the fourth track, Fault, because that one kind of kicks the tempo up a little bit, and it creates this nice slick beat, and underneath it there's this swirling pulsating ambience that kind of flutters underneath it. And I don't know, it just creates this really nice, delectable groove. And the way the ambient kind of shifts, I can never describe it. I don't know if it's like shifting, if it's like arpeggiating or something like that, but it has like this progression to it that kind of, it just gives the song this momentum. It just makes you feel like you're moving throughout the track. You're not just listening to a beat, just kind of playing along. Like it kind of makes you feel like you're moving through some sort of dystopian landscape. So yeah, I really enjoyed that track as well.
I was kind of picking up like little visions of, I don't know, like some fucked up dance club in the future.
Yes.
You just kind of walk into like some abandoned subway or something, and people are just, partying.
Right. Are there other tracks? There are a few more tracks I'd like to discuss, but are there other ones that really kind of stuck out to you?
Well, the first track that features a vocalist, track 5, Sto Abrazov, featuring Nora Ibzanova. I probably butchered that.
You actually, I think you pulled it off decent.
I'm not so sorry,
so I don't get lambasted. Yeah,
but yeah, that has like a lot of cool like atmosphere to it, and then you get the female vocals, which kind of had like this smoky, like romantic vibe to it. I don't know if it's just like the language too, because it's one of those like romantic sounding languages, and just like her delivery.
Yeah, no, it's she has a really beautiful voice. I really like her voice, and I think that word is perfect, and that's the thing that was escaping me. Smoky. I think that is a perfect way to describe it. Yeah. It's
just like this kind of hazy, like noir vibe. Yeah, like, I don't know.
That's a really good way to put it, I think, and I think that kind of speaks to the soundtrack vibe that this album gives off on the whole. And just the whole beat, the whole atmosphere is kind of slow and deep, and now that you describe it, I can imagine it like you're in a club or you're in a place where it's kind of like a smoke-filled, just like a lot of stuff kind of floating through the air that just kind of gives you like that dingy, like if you were to go to like a dingy jazz bar or something like that, and everybody's smoking in there, and it just kind of has like somebody's crooning up on the stage and nobody's really paying attention or caring what's going on. Like people are just kind of
doing their own thing,
just like sitting just kind of sitting there and getting wrapped up in life, I guess, or just trying to let time pass by. And I think her voice carries this one beautifully all the way through. And in addition to her vocals, there's also I thought it was pretty neat when there's also a feature from RoboCat. As folks know her, Sasha Puzan, who is also Proto-U, and she does vocals on track 8 titled Congeal. And I didn't realize it was her, but since, I think she goes by the moniker, or sometimes she described herself as Sasha Katz, or she used to, at least. And I was like, RoboCat, I saw that, and something kind of tipped me off. I'm like,
and that whole cryo-chamber relation and all that.
Yeah, and I was like, what's going on there? And then I looked her up, and I'm like, oh, yep, that's Sasha. And
that's cool.
Because and when I interviewed her as well, she talked about doing a singing voice. I'm like, well, where the hell can I hear it? And I don't think I ever figured out where I could listen to it. And lo and behold, there it is on this album of all places.
That's cool.
And yeah, and it's a long track too. I mean, it's like 8 minutes, but it's a breeze. It's a pretty great song. What'd you think of that?
I love that track. Well, first off, I would say Proto You. It's probably my favorite, dark ambient stuff. It's a lot of her stuff kind of, got me into that world, along with a lot of other featured artists on Cryo Chamber. But yeah, she's great. So it was cool because you told me that before I even listened to it. So I'm like, oh dang, like, that's really cool. So I was kind of looking forward to this track. And you just got that nice. There's like a nice rumbling undercurrent with these higher tones pulsing in and out, and then there's these deep muffled beats kind of start to track in. It's a nice slow build. It kind of takes a bit for her vocals to come in, but it builds up the anticipation nicely, I would say. Yeah, and there's like these cool electrical like sweeps almost, and there's more layers develop, and then her vocals come in. I don't know what she's saying really, but it's kind of, there's like a lot of repeating. Like, I don't know, like at one point it sounds like she's like make it sound, or I don't even know. And then this one really kind of made me think of that scene in The Matrix, the third one, I think, where they're in Zion or whatever. And you have this like cave,
right?
And like they're all dancing, but like there's their own different version of it. In fact, dude, this is the whole like kind of mental, I don't know, story I was painting throughout this whole album. Yeah, dude, they all connect so well. Like, I don't know, like if I wanted to make a movie, if I had, I don't know, $500 million right now, like, dude, there would be some cool stuff. Like, this type of music creates some cool imagery.
Yeah, and I think that this song this has a very infectious beat, and I would say, I mean, we could probably debate which one is the most upbeat, but this one definitely seems to be like the most dancey sort of track, or it definitely has that real upbeat, like just like that entire feeling to it, and it definitely it somewhat signals a little bit of a turn for the album in the way the sounds start to shift afterward. I mean, I guess the subsequent track, Payback, track 9, is still pretty dark and brooding, but the latter portion of the tracks following this one, it starts to brighten up a little bit. But yeah, I really love Sasha's vocals, and I'm just glad that I've been able to hear her voice. On a track. I mean, I think that she actually has some of her own more electronic driven stuff on a SoundCloud under RoboCat. I think that is kind of a stage name.
I feel like I picked that up when we did that episode involving her.
That is very well a possibility. And I just really like her vocals, and she has a very beautiful voice, and I think it just fits the song very well. And as we already discussed, the way the beat kind of drives, and it's pretty goddamn infectious, and it's probably the most just like upbeat and dancey, and and see, the problem is I just want to talk about every track now because I love this guy. I love this guy's production so much. But I won't beat the horse into just into just like bone and dust. But I would say there's some other so there are a couple other tracks like Payback. So let's just try and I'll try and keep this brief. Unless there are certain tracks you want to, are there other tracks specifically that you want to?
I could talk about all of them. Let's just go with Payback.
I was gonna go into Payback and talk about how that one has this really like slimy crawl to it. It kind of has like this smarmy, maybe not smarmy, but it definitely has like this slimy groove to it. Like, it's just so dark, so brooding, and the way the bass kick comes in, it just has this massive punch. It's huge.
Fucking great.
Yeah, and it's just kind of just drenched in these dark timbers. And yeah, the way the bass rumbles, it has just like this unbelievable depth to it. And yeah, I really just like the ambience and the way it creates a more it just adds kind of supplements, makes the track more dynamic.
It's just really cinematic, in my opinion.
Yeah. And what's interesting too, and I can let this be my closing thoughts, and then I'll let you can talk as much as you like. But one weird thought I was having when listening to this earlier this afternoon is, I don't know, as we were discussing this in relation to, say, a soundtrack or a concept, I don't know, the last 3 tracks, so track 10, 11, 12, Own Way, Vice City, and By Way Of, I don't know, I felt like those tracks were almost, people were subject to some sort of like they were living in some, grimy, crime-ridden, futuristic city, and either the last 3 tracks seem to denote some sort of escape from that lifestyle, like that seedy underbelly, because the way the tracks kind of evoke this more upbeat, kind of sun glistening, it kind of just has like these golden rays of ambience coming from it, like you kind of feel the warmth of them. Like Vice City kind of has a beat that's derived out of piano keys, and it has this, it has a dancey vibe, kind of like that track Congeal. But I don't know, maybe it's something where you could imagine like people were in this sort of disgusting city, and this is kind of the respite, like them leaving, or maybe these tracks are some indication of some weird escapist sort of virtual, you know what I mean? Like kind of like a virtual, like a matrix of some sort, as you were describing, like a way to escape.
Definitely.
And like this is somehow representing kind of like that ephemeral desire to like get away from just like the seediness of everything. Because I don't know, like that's what really intrigued me about this album, and it didn't really hit me until later on. And feel free to call me on how stupid.
Nah, dude, that totally makes sense. Like, I mean, I noticed it definitely changed, like, kind of its tones with those last 3 tracks.
Yeah.
And now that you're bringing all that up, I could totally see it. And the track number 10, actually, Own Way, that one is like super cinematic, like soundtrack feeling to me.
Yes. What about it made it cinematic for you?
It's just like the more upbeat, like,
yeah,
I don't know, and the ambience in the background kind of had this weird alien, like, cycling saucer vibe in parts of it.
Yeah, definitely.
And like, I don't know, I'm gonna get a little nerdy here. It kind of reminds me of it was Halo 2.
Oh geez.
Like,
here we go.
Like the parts where you're like in the temple area.
Yeah,
I think it's like Delta Suit Halo or some shit. Whatever.
You of course you would know all these things. And
but yeah, like there's music in that part of that game.
Yeah.
Gave me the exact same kind of vibe. Like, I don't know.
Right.
It kind of brought me back to that part of my childhood.
And that is interesting. And I think I don't know if I can, make that, I can get that same synapse to fire as you did with, with Halo or what have you. But yeah, that track 10 Own Way definitely has and like an adventurous tone to it. It feels a bit like a departure from the darker tracks. And it definitely has this, I don't know, just like this adventurous vibe, like you're just kind of exploring new terrains and just experiencing things you've never seen before. It's weird. I just never thought like I would listen to an album like this and think all these things of it, conceptually, and the feelings that exude from it. But I think that there's a lot of great stuff to pull from this record. I don't know, what were your, do you have any like final thoughts, closing feelings on this one? Like how'd you feel about this overall?
Yeah, it kind of was a little eye-opening to me how, this kind of like beat-driven music kind of inspired all these thoughts in me. Like,
right,
really got the creative juices flowing. Because usually when I hear this type of music, I'm like, oh, it's just like kind of dance music and.
Right, or you can put it on in the background and kind of just tune in every once in a while and be like, oh, okay, that's a cool beat, and then just kind of zone back out or whatever.
Yeah, exactly. Like, that's usually what I would think, but, like, now I'm like, oh, crap. Like, now that I'm so, thanks to you, enveloped into this dark ambient stuff, and now we're getting weirder and weirder with it, and now we're adding in, like, other aspects. I don't know, now I'm starting to see, like, different types of, I don't know, stuff in this music.
Yeah,
I appreciate
it's definitely. I sincerely enjoy this one. I think folks who are fans of dark ambient, even if you like more atmospheric stuff and maybe not so much beat stuff, I think that this would be a real good way to kind of swoon you into, like I think it'll captivate folks a decent bit. There's a lot to digest, and it rewards with repeated listens. Just with the ambience and the moods it conjures, as well as just the grimy beats and kind of the downtrodden, really dark, brooding atmospheres it all exudes. It's a pretty remarkable album, and I highly recommend this one.
And that concludes episode 17 of Voices from Corners Unknown. Lots of different sounds in this one. It seems like we're expanding more and more into our musical journey here, and I'm glad there's people here to listen to our transformations.
Right. Yeah, and feel free, as always appreciative of constructive criticism, constructive feedback, ways to improve, and if there's certain genres or releases you think that we should be discussing that we are completely glossing over, feel free to send me an email, and we'll take it into consideration. We're going to try to continue pushing each of these episodes into terrains we're not necessarily familiar with, just because we find it pretty interesting. So
from corners unknown.
Right. So thank you for putting up with our rambling and tuning in for this episode, and we'll see you. You'll hear from us in the next one.